Welcome to the Bendigo Art Gallery and our live streamed event, Meet the Artist with Hoda Afshar. I'm Clare Needham and I'm a curator here at Bendigo Art Gallery and the curator of the exhibition, The Burning World. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which Bendigo Art Gallery is located, the Dja Dja Wurrung people. I'd like to extend my respect to their leaders and elders, past, present and emerging, and to all First Nations people in the audience today. It's with great pleasure that I introduce you to Hoda Afshar, a Melbourne-based artist and scholar whose recent work Remain features in the exhibition The Burning World. Hoda and I will be in conversation for the next half an hour. You can ask questions via our Facebook feed, and which I will present to Hoda at 2:30. Thanks so much for joining us, and I hope you enjoyed today. Hoda Afshar began her career as a documentary photographer in her birthplace of Iran, moving to Australia in 2007. Through her photography and moving image work, she considers the representation of gender, marginality and displacement, employing processes that disrupt traditional image-making practices. Hello, Hoda.
Hi, how are you?
Great. Thanks so much for speaking to us this afternoon.
Thanks for having me.
So we might talk directly about Remain, given that I have the privilege of sitting right in front of it right now in the gallery space. I'd love you to chat about what drew you to the men on Manus Island that were left to languish when the processing centre was closed.
That's a question that I find, to be honest, a little bit difficult to answer, because I don't see, for example, a work like Remain as an idea to kind of elaborate on how I came up with the idea or just like how it started. It's like a real harsh fact that existed and still exists to this day. And then I intuitively responded to. It was like a moment that I kind of knew I have to do whatever I can. I didn't think that I'm going to go and make work about refugees for the sake of making work about the refugee crisis. It was seeing something really painful and like feeling it, like something that was quite extreme and surreal to me as a migrant in Australia, as someone who's kind of believed that like this country has like a different sort of system that respects humanity, respects individuals and so on. Like it was quite shocking for me to see the treatment of the refugees. And I just wanted to, because I was familiar with the activities of Behruz Buchani and how he was trying to get the voice out, and his kind of, writing became more and more known throughout the years that he was secretly first publishing articles from there, and then he started publishing them under his name. He's a Kurdish Iranian activist and writer and refugee who was detained on Manus Island too. And so I thought I'd do, we share, like the language and culture. My father was a Kurdish man too. It was that really strong personal connection, but it wasn't just about Behruz or the Kurdish community. It was about the issue. And I thought, okay, if Behruz is there and working, maybe I can help him out in some ways.
Great. And so your past work also has been sort of looking into hidden stories and stories of experiences that perhaps are suppressed or contained, and use your lens and your camera to really bring those to the fore and amplify personal stories and lived experience. And you do that through a collaboration with the subjects that you work with, which is a really interesting process. It would be great for you to perhaps talk a little bit more about your collaborative process with the subjects that you work with in your work.
Sure. I think my interest in photography and the ideas related to visibility and marginality has a long kind of like story behind it, which we don't have enough time to talk about, but it goes back to my upbringing in a country like in Iran, that sort of like the surface and what's real beneath the surface, what's outside and inside, is always kind of like a really strong contrast between the two. So for me, photography became a tool to record the unseen, untold, unheard stories of my own generation prior to my migration, and to kind of keep a record of what wasn't shared or made visible to the outside world. And later on, after my migration, I went through this struggle of, like the identity crisis. And then you realize that your struggle isn't a struggle against an image that exists in the mind of the society. So my interest became in the sort of like, I had to go through this long research of like doing a PhD to understand how these images function and where do they come from, how they're fabricated, who benefits from it. And then you get into this whole world of post-colonial studies and theories, and you realize that what seems to be quite an easy sort of thing for us to click and make an image and move on has a very long history of its connection to imperial systems and colonial systems and so on. So the visual language that we pick up immediately with, whether it's our phone cameras or like a professional practice, is already an imperial language. So for me, the question is how we can actually dismantle these categories of marginality through images, because they are constructed through images. How we can use the same medium of photography and make images that are contrasting those previously existed and created images. I'm not claiming that I can do it. I try to do it. I try to find methods of challenging these preconceptions and so on. So one of the strong sort of like methodologies that is consistent throughout my work is collaboration. Is one of the methods I use to challenge myself first as an image maker, and also share the voice and kind of give back like the agency to the subject matter, because there's this really strong power dynamic often between the image maker, the camera, and the subject. And camera has this sort of quality that puts you in the place of like, authority when you're holding it, because you are going to record that story and take it out, and you have a platform as the image maker to share it, and share it in the way that you want to share it, And so that's something that I'm very conscious of when I work with other people's stories. And I want to remove that hierarchy. And in the process of collaboration, it often starts off with not making any images. It's about us getting to know each other. I want them to know about me as much as I want to know about them. And so we become familiar with one another's story to a certain degree. And then we talk about how we can actually tell the story in a way that is more tangible and humane and just and equal. Yeah.
And you really feel that intimacy in your work as well, that you have a connection as well with the subject matter or the people that you're working with. There's that the depth that you can achieve by spending time together. So perhaps you could talk a little bit more about Remain and how it was made together.
Thank you. That's so lovely to hear. Remain was basically me getting in contact with Behruz Buchani on Manus Island through a few connections that I had, and I got in contact with his translator, and then he put me in contact with Behruz, and we spoke, we exchanged voice messages, probably more than like hundreds of voice messages a day, sharing thoughts and ideas. And Behruz was really excited because we kind of immediately realized that we share very similar views about the issue, and we could understand one another and the depth of the complexity of the narrative that he was writing about in his book, and things that he wanted to challenge in his writing was exactly what I wanted to do with my video. So it's interesting because when Remain came out, it was before Behruz publishes his book. Like the book comes out, but he, throughout the process of research, he sent me different chapters of the book as it was like in progress, and there were parts that really moved me to the core, and I could see that, like, how his method of telling these stories were also that combining beauty and violence together, something that we both talked a lot about, the trust in the language of art as something that is beautiful and draws people in, and then you can actually engage them with the message, and then when they realize that, like, behind this beautiful surface there's all these horrors, that's where actually it can become effective. And if you read Behruz's book, there's a very similar sort of like quality to the video, and the video was also born out of a lot of conversations that we had together, and we had to plan the travel and go around the like restrictions that were placed there. And I knew that I can't go into Manus Island if I say that I'm a photographer going there to make work about the situation, because Australian government's successful strategy of keeping these people there was to put them in faraway islands, deny access to those places, and people hardly knew what was happening. So I knew that I can't go there. So I had to lie about my intentions to travel to Papua New Guinea. And it was also very important for me to get the advice of the locals of the island on the issue. And Behruz got one of the locals to pick me up from there, and I stayed with them, and I kind of interviewed their families and like got their ideas around what the Australian government was doing there, and they all wanted me to get this message out. Basically, they were quite traumatized by the way that Australia has portrayed also this island, which is a very sacred place to the locals. They love that place, and now the image of the island is portrayed as a horrific kind of place of torture and trauma. So it was also with the help of another number of the locals who got me out of Manus. Like, one of the men who helped us, his name was Robin, and him and his family were living in a tiny island near Manus, and they were picking us up with the refugees that Behruz was able to get out of the camp, and we were getting on the boat going to his island, and we did build a studio on the island. Do you want me to share some footage from
Please.
the backstage? Can you see my screen now? I think you can. Okay. Yeah. So this is basically the locals that were taking care of us, Robin and his family. Let me see if I can open it. Okay. This is his island, and we're setting up a studio there.
Okay, we're gonna put it a bit up.
No, that's perfect. For the as you can see, like, they kind of dig holes and place holes in there, and behind this fabric, like facing the sun for me, and like we sort of created a stage there, and it was quite fascinating how everything came together. This is like the team of the directors. That's Behruz Buchani and his Kurdish friends that were among the first group of people who came to the island. Like, as I said, when we were arriving, we were making fire, we were cooking food, and just chatting and hanging out. This is Behruz. He wished he was Noah, and he could open the ocean for everyone to leave the island. And this is, again, like, every day getting on the boat. On the other side is Manus Island, and we were kind of bringing the refugees here. These are another group of the locals, Papus, who helped us a lot to make the work. So it was basically a kind of collaboration between myself and all of them. This is, for example, when we were making one of the images. So, like, basically, for example, we were testing out different sort of ideas of how to create these images, and like this is the final outcome of the scene that you saw just now. We were kind of using water, pouring it from above, from the side. It was basically like choosing different natural elements in there to. Probably a lot of you have seen this portrait of Behruz. I asked every single one of them to pick something from the island that can express their emotions and feelings best. So that was, again, like me trying to close this. Can you see me? It was me trying to break that passive image of the refugee as the subject that sits there and stares into the camera or behind the bars and so on.
That's great. And so in terms of that representation and your interest in disrupting the, I guess, the dominant narrative or the stories that we're told or the images that are flooded into our consciousness to, I guess, frame the way that we see things, and your interest in disrupting that, and part of that is inviting subjects to share their own personal experiences.
Exactly. And also, like, the question for me was, how can you portray the violence and image the violence that has been imposed on the bodies of these individuals and their souls, basically, without reducing the entire narrative to that trauma? Like, how can you portray them as humans with, all their complexities, fragility, strength, like, as Behruz always says, like, refugees are either portrayed as demons or angels, like, but they're humans, like all of us. And how can you do that? And so basically, like, by bringing that sort of movement and like theatricality there, it's just, you see the person who's telling the story engaged in the process of making. They are a part of the process of making, and that shows also the different layers of their complexity as human, like, which separates them from the others, which again, like, is another way of opposing that identical stereotypical image of a refugee as like a group of victims, basically, that denies them individuality, agency, and so on.
There's also that the interesting sort of image of the skin in terms of that vulnerability, but also humanity and strength. And you've got some previous work as well. Your previous work, Behold, also taps into that similar aesthetic.
Yeah, it's good, interesting you mentioned that, because basically that was a very intentional decision I made earlier on to extend the aesthetic that I used in my Behold series and bring it into Remain. Again, maybe I should share some of the images from Behold for some of the audience who haven't seen the work. But the work was made again in collaboration with a group of young homosexual men who invited me to photograph them in this secret bathhouse that like, it was the only public place for them that they could openly explore their sexuality. And so here, the nakedness of these bodies, again, to me, this is like another form of exclusion. And invisibility and the desire to be heard and made visible and so on. So the nakedness of the bodies to me represent this idea of bare life. Bare life is something that Hannah Arendt and George Agamben talk about. It's like the life, individuals that are stripped of basic human rights, basically. And to me, that was like what was symbolically representing that idea. Can you see me?
Yep, I can see you.
Okay, because I can't see you now. Okay, so this idea of, okay, it's fixed. Thanks. This idea of the nakedness again, I wanted to bring it into Remain as well, because again, we're looking at the bodies that are just, how can I describe it? Again, like the bare life, the idea of bare life, but also I have a friend who talks about this idea of dismantling whiteness. And he's a scholar who writes about it, and he actually has a book called The Image of Whiteness, Daniel C. Blight. And he always, like in his talks, at the end of the talk, he asks all the white people to go home and stand in front of the mirror naked and ask themselves, what is so special about me that I think makes me different from others? So this idea of like the nakedness that at the end of the day, it's like we all share the same sort of like body, and like we're all human. And that to me was again another way of addressing that.
And you've taken that also into your new work that you're working on now for the Photo 2021 festival, in terms of looking at skin and bodies, but also about hidden stories and amplifying personal experiences of trauma and tragedy as well. Did you want to just talk a little bit, we've got about 5 minutes left, about your new work that you're working on for next year?
The work is, this is the first time I turned my camera inwardly, looking at my immediate sort of environment, which was like Australia. And again, this wasn't something that I chose, okay, what I should talk about next. It just happens, like subjects after. When you're interested in a certain kind of area of knowledge, it comes to you as well. Like the whistleblowing grew out of like my conversations with the refugees on Manus Island, when they told me about the staff members who were there, whether from the medical or just like any other sort of like areas, prison guards, teachers, who were kind of complaining about the treatment of the refugees to the system. They were immediately removed from the island, lost their jobs, threatened with 2 years of jail, and silenced, basically. I couldn't believe it again. Like this was like, to me, in huge contrast with the image that I had of this liberal democratic system that I relocated to. So I kind of needed to understand more about it, and I realized that this is actually what they do across all different governmental organizations here as well, for people who work within the system. If they have to all sign a deed of confidentiality, and if they speak about what they see and the government's wrongdoing, they're facing 2 years jail. So I collaborated with the scholar when I was invited to make new work for Photo 2021 now, the festival. I spoke to a scholar at Melbourne University, Clare Needham, and her area of research has been on this matter for quite a long time. So we collaborated, and we got into more and more areas of, like practice, which from disability to aged care to prison, youth detention prisons and offshore detentions, and the Army, ASIO, and all of those organizations. So the work is made with the Australians who are treated quite badly for choosing morality over the system, basically. here again, the focus is on body politics, and I made again 2 different bodies of work, which is like photographic and also a large video installation, single channel. And the documentary is like a series of interviews with the whistleblowers. But within that, what I wanted to do was to kind of portray that existential crisis that a whistleblower goes through, and to montage different body parts, which are like really, really close-ups of the skin to a point that you can recognize the individual's identity, and stitch them together in really obvious montaged way to suggest the body of these individuals as one that is again representing the body of the society in pain. And the confessions and narratives are quite horrific, to be honest. And I'm really hoping that the collection of all these stories together can send a message to the society, because they're all talking about this idea of active blindness, that the society consciously chooses to remain blind to these issues. And like the other aspect of the project, which is the photographic work, is made with 3D cameras. And it's like, for me, the question was here the opposite. The question wasn't about visibility. It was like about how you can make visible these messages without making visible the individual, and which is the opposite of the struggle of the refugees, basically. And so the 3D technology helped me to remove certain aspects of the face, including the eyes. And I used Greek statues aesthetic to somehow also refer to the formation of democracy, but also to Greek tragic figures, which were always like figures who were caught between system and the law and morality. And to me, the whistleblowers are modern tragic figures now.
Thank you so much for sharing those insights into your new work, and also your previous body of work. And you've been able to watch Remain behind me, which also has an immensely potent and powerful sound component too, with the men sharing their stories. We've just come to the end of our talking time, Hoda, and I'm just wondering if some questions might have come through from the audience to share with you. I'm just going to see if I can bring those up. None that have come through just yet. So I might just ask you another question, if that's okay.
Sure.
So some of your visual aesthetic is actually inspired by filmmakers, and you've got a really beautiful sensibility around sort of large-scale cinematic, and I've just referred before, we've got an 8-metre projection here of your work. What is it about that cinematic quality? You talked a little bit already about beauty that allows you to explore some of the ideas that you're working with as well.
Like, I always had a really strong interest in cinema, and although everything I do is predominantly photographic, but I find my inspirations always in other areas of creative artistic practice, like mostly cinema, but also visual arts. And like cinema, especially the slow cinema of like Iranian new wave cinema and Italian sort of like cinema, has always really greatly inspired me. And like for me, the slow cinema has this sort of ability which is to kind of make the audience to meditate on certain moments. It's something that goes against this idea of fast-paced montage, which kind of draws you outside the reality and the real world. Like you see in 2 hours period of a film, like the entire story of someone's life, which is impossible to see. But so the slow cinema goes against that. It's like, for example, in the films of filmmakers like Bella Tarr, which is one of my most favorite filmmakers. Like you see someone walking towards the horizon, and the camera meditates on that till that person disappears in the horizon, because that's how you see things in reality. So I kind of really love that idea, because to me, again, there's some sort of a photographic quality in that kind of cinema as well, because that's what photographs also get you to do, to meditate on that passing moment. So with the story of the refugees here, it was like the slow cinema of like Abbas Kiarostami, or most importantly for me was like Tarkovsky, that kind of really inspired me in the way that they communicate those complex human emotions through the beauty of nature, landscape, and yeah, like a slowness of the shots.
Thank you. I'm not sure if anybody else has any questions that they'd like to ask Hoda. I certainly have lots. I really appreciate your time this afternoon again, Hoda, for sharing with us.
Thanks for having me. I'm enjoying this.
Did you have any images to show of your new work that you're working on that you mentioned?
It's meant to be a little secret.
That's okay. No, let's keep it for 2021.
The work will come out in February 2021 now, and it was meant to open in April 2020, but because of the pandemic, we kept postponing it, and now it's postponed till who knows. Like, yeah, hopefully this time it will definitely happen to like 2021, February 18 is the opening. This is the studio of the 3D studio that I told you about, which has like 110 cameras firing at the same time to record all the details of someone's face and head. And but one thing that these cameras are not capable of recording is the details of the eyes. So the eyes remain blank in a sense, and which is very similar to Hellenistic kind of like statues of you know, ancient Greeks. And so like I really like the idea of using this technology, because to me it also refers to the struggle that we have with like surveillance and control and censorship, that thanks to the pandemic now, that the government's imposing that even more on every aspect of our lives. And it's just, I really hope that we can actually get outside these regulations after this is all over, but I somehow doubt it. So like the statues that we, like the 3D space, the photographs that it makes of you, this is like the first test that I did on myself, that we looked at the image that the cameras made and we put it in the 3D space. And then I decided to kind of change them to, let me see if I've got, like, for example, these Greek Hellenistic sculptures that you see here. Can you see them?
Yeah, yeah.
So like this specific period is quite important, because it was the first time. Before that, the only people who were kind of had their statues made were like important political figures or heroes. But Hellenistic artists decided to sort of like make statues of everyday people. And also the aim for the first time in making them was to capture their emotions and feelings, in a sense, like to bring out, it was something that was never done before, because like for the heroes and religious figures, it was always about like portraying them as like neutral, strong, and with a kind of certain mode of representation. So what I wanted to do with the statues I've made in in 3D space also was to capture the feelings of the individual. And that's why I wanted to use this technology, because I could do one click instead of 100 clicks of going around the subject and scan their body. I wanted to have one click and 110 cameras fire, so we can actually capture some emotions and feelings in the statue. The statues were designed in the 3D space and printed later on as 3D. And it's so interesting because this is a photograph, a 3D object. It's but it's made by the camera and printed as the outcome of like a photographic process. So this is new forms of image making to me. So later on, I kind of continued photographing the statues. The final outcome will be the images that you see of these statues on billboards in the city, and the video installation will be inside in a gallery.
Thank you so much for that sneaky peek insight. The Burning World exhibition is presented as the part of the extended program of Photo 2021, which is the International Festival of Photography. We're really looking forward to that next year. So thank you so much again, Hoda, for sharing all of those amazing insights into your practice.
Thank you.
We do have one question that's just come through, which will be our last question for the day, and then we'll wrap up. Has your art always been concerned with social justice issues, and do you feel art can create real change within a society?
I think there's all art in a way is political and concerned with social issues, because politics is all about what's visible and what's not visible. So if you're working with like images, whether you want it or not, they're political anyway, because they are giving visibility to something. And my work, as I said, it's just responds, although it seems to be less personal and more social political. Every single work that I make in a way is connected to my personal experiences. Being an Iranian and like coming from that sort of geography, politics is part of your everyday life, and it's inevitable. So everything you do is consequently political too. So I think responding to my personal experiences, upbringing after the Islamic Revolution, migration, leaving the country, and becoming more and more conscious of all these like social hierarchies that exist, and unequal geographies, and how it affects me and the rest of us, and so on. So they're kind of themes that come into my work, because that's part of my personal journey as well. In terms of trusting whether art can do something or not, yes, I do, because maybe not immediately and maybe not radically, but I put more trust in small changes than radical changes, because the radical changes often come with violence.
Thank you, Hoda. Well, again, thank you so much for today and all of the great insights articulated around your work, and we really appreciate the time that you've given to us today, and we hope people will be able to come in, fingers crossed, soon to see your work in person at the gallery. But at this point, there's lots of ways to engage with Remain and see it online. If you head to our website, you can have a look at some excerpts there, and also some Hoda talking a bit more about it, and also an introduction from myself with some views of the work installed at the gallery, alongside the work of Peter Clancy, Michael Cook and Rosemary Lang, who are also got amazing work in the exhibition as well. So I'd just like today to thank our partners Bendigo Venues and Events, and in particular our technician for today, Callum McClure. And I also would like to mention too that there are some really great BCE resources for this exhibition too, which are on our website for those teachers who might be listening, there's some great ways to engage with the artists and their ideas through those resources. So thank you so much, and we look forward to seeing your work again as it evolves, and your work at Photo 2021. Thanks for the little insight there too.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Hoda, and thank you all for attending today.